Hello and welcome back to my channel, Amoeba Savant. Today I am continuing the Brothers Karamazov. I am reading book 3 called The Sensualists, and this is chapter 5, The Confession of an Ardent Heart, Head Over Heels. Please subscribe. Now, Alyosha said, I know the first part of this business. Yes, you know the first part. It was quite dramatic, and it took place in that other town. But the second part will end tragically, and it will take place right here, in this town. I still don't understand a thing about the second part, Alyosha said. What makes you think I understand it? I don't either. Just a minute, Dmitry. There's one word that puzzles me in this whole business. Engagement. Tell me, are you still engaged to marry her? We didn't get engaged right away, not for 3 months after her visit. The next day I told myself that the incident was closed, over and done with, and that there must be no sequel to it. To propose to her now, I felt, would be rather despicable. And as to her, for the whole of the 6 weeks that she stayed in town after that, I never heard a single word from her. Except for one thing, it's true. The day after her visit, her maid appeared stealthily and, without explanation, handed me an envelope addressed to me. When I opened it, I found it contained the change from the 5,000 rubles. They needed 4,500, and, in addition, they lost about 200 rubles in cashing the letter of credit. So she sent me only 260 rubles, I believe, and I remember very well that it was just the money without an explanatory note or anything. I examined the envelope, hoping to find some penciled note, some sign, but found nothing. Well, what could I do? I went on a spree to use up what money I had left, and I went so wild that finally the new major was forced to reprimand me. As to the lieutenant colonel, to everyone's surprise, he handed over the battalion moneys in time, to everyone's surprise, since no one thought he had the full amount. But after he had turned it over, he fell sick and took to his bed. After 3 weeks, softening of the brain set in, and he died 5 days later. He was buried with military honors, since his resignation had not had time to go through. About 10 days after the funeral, Katerina, Agafya, and Agafya's aunt left for Moscow. And it was only on the very day of their departure, I had not seen them and didn't go to see them off, that I received a tiny envelope containing a 1-line message on dainty blue notepaper. I'll write to you later. Wait. K. That was all. Now I'll tell you the rest of the story very briefly. In Moscow, their fortunes suddenly changed, as unexpectedly as in a story from the Arabian Nights. Katerina's richest relative, the widow of a general, lost her 2 nieces, who were her heiresses within a few days. They had both died of smallpox during the same week. The grief-stricken old woman received Katerina, who had just arrived in Moscow, as if she were a long-lost daughter, immediately changing her will in her favor and thus taking care of her future. And, for the meantime, she transferred 80,000 rubles to Katerina's name as a dowry or to be used as she saw fit. She was a somewhat hysterical old lady. I saw quite a bit of her later in Moscow. Well then, I suddenly received in the mail 4,500 rubles. Obviously, I am very surprised indeed, quite stunned. 3 days later, the promised letter arrives. I still have that letter. I'll always carry it with me. She proposes to me herself in that letter. I love you, she writes. I love you madly. It's all the same if you don't love me. If only you're willing to marry me. Don't be afraid. I won't interfere with you in any way. I'll be like a piece of your furniture, like the rug under your feet. I want to love you as long as I live. I want to save you from yourself. Alyosha, I'm not even worthy to rephrase those lines in my own vile words, or to repeat them in my vile tone, that loathsome tone of mine which I have never been able to get rid of. That letter pierced something very, very deep inside me, and it still hurts me to this day. Don't you see? I answered her immediately. I couldn't possibly go to Moscow right away. The tears were running down my cheeks as I wrote to her. There is one thing I'm ashamed of, though. I mentioned in my letter that she now was a rich heiress with a dowry, while I was still a penniless and uneducated oaf. I dragged money into it that way. I should have kept quiet about money then, but somehow I wrote it without realizing what it would mean to her at first. By the same mail, I wrote to Ivan too, explaining everything to him. He was also in Moscow then, and I wrote him a 6-page letter explaining it to him as best I could. Why are you gaping at me like that? Well, sure, Ivan fell in love with her, and he still loves her. And now I realize it was a blunder on my part. A blunder, that is, in the worldly, conventional sense, but perhaps my blunder will save us all yet. Why, can't you see that she likes him and respects him tremendously? Do you imagine that, after comparing the two of us, she could go on loving a man like me, especially after what happened? I am certain that she can love only a man like you and not a man like him. What she loves is not me, but her own virtue, Dmitry blurted out almost spitefully. His eyes flashed. He laughed awkwardly and his face turned deep red. Then he banged his fist on the table. I swear, Alyosha, he cried, sounding furious at himself, and you are free to believe me or not, but it is as true as that God is holy and that Christ is our Lord. I swear that, though I just laughed at her noble feelings, I know she's 1,000,000 times better than I am, infinitely superior to me, and that those noble feelings of hers are perfectly sincere as an angel's. And what makes it so tragic is that I know it. What's wrong with indulging in dramatic gestures? Why, I make dramatic gestures myself, but I know that I'm sincere, completely sincere. As to Ivan, I can well imagine how he must be cursing human nature now, especially a man of his intelligence, who is given preference over him. Rosie wants out. As to Ivan, I can well imagine how he must be cursing human nature now, especially a man of his intelligence, who is given preference over him. A freak who, while already engaged to her, is quite unable to abstain from debauchery in full view of everybody, including her. And a creature like that is accepted, while he is rejected. And why? For no other reason than that, out of sheer gratitude, a woman has decided to do violence to herself and to throw away her life. It makes no sense. Of course, I've never talked about that side of it to Ivan, and he's never even hinted at it to me. But I'm sure that life will follow its proper course in the end. The worthy man will occupy his rightful place, and the unworthy one will vanish in some dark alley and never be heard of again. And there, in that dark and filthy alley which is so dear to him, where he feels so much at home amidst the stench and the dirt, he'll perish happily, because that's what he really wants. But I guess I've talked myself dry, and my words have lost much of their meaning. I'm just slapping them together any old way, but it will happen just as I say. I'll drown in the mud in my back alley, and she'll marry Ivan. But wait a minute, Mitya, Alyosha said very nervously. There's still a point that you haven't cleared up for me. You're still engaged to her, aren't you? So how can you break the engagement if she doesn't want it broken? Yes, I'm officially and solemnly engaged to marry her. We became engaged when I got to Moscow, and it was done in grand style with all due ceremony, icons and all. And that relative of hers, the rich general's widow, not only gave Katya her blessing, but even went so far as to congratulate her, believe it or not. You have chosen the right man, she told her. I can see that right away. She didn't like Ivan, though, and was cool toward him. You know, in Moscow I talked to Katya a great deal and told her a lot about myself. I did so honestly and was completely frank, completely sincere. She heard me out, and, of course, there was some sweet embarrassment, there were tender words, although there were some proud words, too. Anyhow, she made me promise to reform. So I did promise, and now... And now what? And now I called to you and pulled you over the fence into this garden in order to send you today. I want you to remember this date, to see Katerina for me, and it must be today, and tell her that... Tell her what? That I'm not coming to see her. Ever. And to give her my regards. How can you do that? That's just why I'm sending you instead of going myself, because I can't do it. But you, where will you go? To that back alley. So you'll go to Grushenka? Alyosha cried in pain, throwing up his hands in despair. Rosie's back. So you'll go to Grushenka, Alyosha cried in pain, throwing up his hands in despair. I couldn't believe it when Rakitin told me. I thought you just went to see her a few times and that was the end of that. You mean, how can a man engaged to a girl like Katerina go and see someone like that, especially when the whole town knows about it? Now, Alyosha, despite everything, I do have a sense of honor. What are you doing? Maybe we'll catch some of Psycho Kitty over here. At the very moment I started seeing Grushenka, I stopped being Katerina's fiancé and stopped being an honorable man. Why, I'm very well aware of that. Why do you look at me like that? The first time I went to her place, it was to give her a beating. I had learned, and I know it's the absolute truth, that retired captain, acting on father's behalf, had given her one of my IOUs, so she could threaten to sue me and thus make me behave. They thought that they could scare me that way. So I went to Grushenka's to give her a good thrashing. I only vaguely remembered having seen her before. There's nothing so striking about her at first glance. I knew about the old merchant who kept her. He is sick now and bedridden, but nevertheless he is pretty sure to see that she lacks nothing, whatever happens. I also knew that she was greedy for money and satisfied her greed by lending money at exorbitant rates of interest, that she was a sharp and merciless bitch. So I went there to give her that beating, but then I just stayed. It was as if all hell had broken loose, like an epidemic of the plague. Well, I got infected and am still infected today, and I know now it will never be any different. I am doomed to go around in that circle for all time. So that's where I stand, Alyosha. And it so happened that one day I went to her place, I had 3,000 rubles in my pocket. Stella. Okay. And it so happened that on the day I went to her place, I had 3,000 rubles in my pocket. Fancy that, a beggar with 3,000 rubles in his pocket. So we took a little trip to Mokroye, which is 20 miles away, paid for gypsies and champagne, made all the local peasants drunk on champagne, and tossed hundreds and hundreds of rubles to the women who were there. 3 days later I felt marvelous and was completely broke. You may think I was feeling so marvelous because I had achieved what I was after. No, sir, she wouldn't even let me look at it from a distance. I tell you, Alyosha, it's that curve she has. Grushenka's whole body has a particular curve that can be recognized even in her foot, even in the little toe of her left foot. Well, that I saw and I kissed it, but that's as far as I went, believe me. Why should I marry you, she told me. You haven't a kopeck to your name. But if you promise never to beat me and to let me do whatever I please, then I may marry you yet. She laughed when she said that, and still laughs when I bring it up. Dmitry got up in a fury. All of a sudden he looked very drunk. His eyes were bloodshot. Do you really want to marry her, Mitya? If she wants me. Oh, sorry, that was Alyosha. Do you really want to marry her, Mitya? If she wants me, I will, right away. And if she doesn't, I'll go on as I am now, try to hang around her, be the janitor in her yard if I can. Hey, Alyosha, Dmitry suddenly stopped, seized his brother by the shoulders, and shook him with tremendous force. Hey, you innocent little boy, don't you understand that all this is just raving, just the impossible raving of a madman, that it is all fated to end tragically? I assume you know, Alyosha, that although I am a man of despicable and depraved passions, I'll never become a petty thief, that nothing will ever turn Dmitry Karamazov into a pickpocket. Well, for your information, Alexei, my brother, I am a petty thief who steals from people's pockets, or wherever else he can find money. Just before I went to Grushenka's that first time, when I intended to beat her up, Katerina had sent for me to ask me to go to another town and mail 3,000 rubles to her sister Agafya in Moscow for her, because for some reason or other she didn't want people here to learn about it. And that was the 3,000 rubles that I had in my pocket when I got to Grushenka's, and it was that money that I spent in Mokroye. I told Katerina that I had gone to the town and sent the money, and that I'd give her the post office receipt later because I hadn't brought it with me. And of course I've never given it to her to this day. Now imagine, you go to her place today and tell her that I sent you to give her my regards and to say goodbye, and she asks you, "And what about the money?" If it hadn't been for that, you could still have said, "My brother is a despicable sensualist who cannot control his passions. He did not send the money you gave him because he is like a primitive animal and had to follow his instincts." Now, if I hadn't stolen her money, you still could have told her. But whatever else he is not a thief, so here is your 3,000 rubles. He sends it back to you. He suggests you mail the money to your sister yourself, and he sends you his best regards. But as things stand now, what could you answer her if she suddenly asked you about the money? Oh, Mitya, you feel so terribly miserable, but please don't torture yourself. Don't despair like this. It's not quite as bad as you imagine. Are you saying that because you're worried that I may shoot myself if I can't give her back the 3,000? Are you saying that? You needn't worry. I won't kill myself, and that's the trouble. I don't have the strength to do it now. Later, perhaps. I don't know. But now the only thing I want to do is go to Grushenka's. I don't care about anything else. And what will you do with Grushenka? I'll be her husband, and I'll be worthy of her, and when a lover comes to visit her, I'll step out of the room and wait outside, clean the mud off the galoshes of her gentleman friends, like the samovar, run errands. Katerina will understand everything, Alyosha said in an unexpectedly solemn tone. She'll understand how deeply unhappy you are, and she'll resign herself. She's a woman of superior intelligence, and she will see that it's impossible to be unhappier than you are. She won't forgive me at all, Mitya said with a bitter grin. This is something, my boy, that no woman would accept. But do you know what would be best? What? To pay her back the 3,000. Where can you get it, though? But wait, I have 2,000 myself, and Ivan will give you 1,000. That will make up the 3. So take the money and give it back to her. Yes, but how long do you think it will take to get hold of that 3,000 rubles? Besides, you're not legally of age yet and cannot dispose of your money. No, it must be today, and no later that you give her my regards, with or without the 3,000, because it has reached a point where I cannot stand it any longer. Tomorrow will already be too late. I want you to go to Father's for me. Father's? Yes, stop at Father's before you go to see her and ask him for 3,000 rubles. But Mitya, he'll never give it to me. Of course he won't. I know it only too well. Do you know, Alexei, what it means to be desperate? Yes, I do. So listen then. Legally he doesn't owe me a thing, but morally he owes me something, doesn't he? Why, it was by using my mother's 28,000 that he managed to make 100,000 for himself. So let him give me just 3,000 for the 28, only 3, and take my soul out of a living hell. He'll have many of his sins forgiven him if he does that. And I'm thirsty. And if I give you my solemn word that the 3,000 will be the end of it, and I give you my solemn word that the 3,000 will be the end of it, he'll never hear of me again. For the last time, I'm giving him a chance to act as a father. Tell him that God himself has sent him this opportunity. He'll never give it to you, Mitya. I know it. I know it perfectly well, especially under the present circumstances. Moreover, there's something else I know. Very recently, perhaps only yesterday, he found out that there was a serious possibility, I say serious, that Grushenka meant it when she said she might take the plunge and marry me after all. He knows that Hellcat's character, so how could he possibly even consider giving me money which would, if anything, strengthen the possibility, when he's crazy about her himself? And even that's not the whole story. There's more to it. I know that at least 5 days ago he drew 3,000 rubles out of the bank in 100-ruble bills, put them in a large envelope, sealed it with 5 seals, and tied it up with a red ribbon. Then he inscribed the envelope, "To my angel Grushenka, if she comes to me." He did all that in great secrecy. No one except his flunky Smerdyakov knows about the money, but then Father trusts him as he does himself. and so he's been waiting for Grushenka for 3 or 4 days now. He hopes she'll come to pick up the envelope, for he sent her word about it, and she answered that she might come. But if she does go to the old man, how can I marry her after that? So you understand now why I'm here, sitting as though in ambush, lying in wait for her? That's right, for her. There's a fellow called Foma who lives in this house with those sluts. Foma was a private in my battalion. He does odd jobs for them, acts as their watchman at night, and shoots grouse during the day. That's how he lives. So here I am in Foma's place, but neither Foma nor the women know my secret, that I'm lying in wait here. Is Smerdyakov the only one who knows about Grushenka and father? Right, the only one, and he'll let me know if she comes to the old man's. Was it he who told you about the envelope? That's right, in utmost secrecy. Even Ivan knows nothing about the money or about the rest. As a matter of fact, the old man wants Ivan out of his way for a few days, so he's sending him to Chermashnya. Someone there has been offering 8,000 rubles for the wood-cutting rights to the forest. So father asked Ivan, help me out, go over there for 2 or 3 days and see what it's all about. What he really wants is to have Ivan out of the way when Grushenka comes. So he's expecting Grushenka even today? No, she won't come today. There are indications of that. She certainly isn't coming today, Mitya suddenly shouted. That's what Smerdyakov says. Father is drunk and is sitting at table with Ivan. Go there, Alexei, and ask him for 3,000. But wait, Mitya, what's the matter with you? Alyosha jumped up from his seat, looking intently at Dmitry. For a moment he thought his brother had gone mad. Don't worry, I'm not crazy. I know what I'm doing, Dmitry said emphatically and in a peculiar, solemn tone. And I did ask you to go and see father. I know what I'm saying. I believe in miracles. What miracle? In the miracle of God's providence. God knows what's in my heart. He can see my despair. He sees the whole thing, so surely he won't allow something horrible to happen. I do believe in miracles, Alyosha. Go on, then. All right, I'm going. Will you wait for me here? Yes, I will. And I understand that you won't be back too soon, that you won't be able to just walk in and ask him for it. Besides, he's drunk now, so I'll wait for you 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 hours or even 7 hours. But I want you to know that today, even if it's at midnight, you must go to Katerina's with or without the money and tell her that I send her my best regards. I want you actually to use those words. He told me to give you my best regards. But Mitya, listen. What if Grushenka comes today, and if not today, tomorrow or the day after? Grushenka? I'll find out about it, break in and stop them. And if, then I'll kill. I won't be able to stand it. Kill whom? The old man. I won't kill her. How can you say that, Mitya? I don't know. Perhaps I won't kill him, but maybe I will. I'm afraid I'll hate the sight of him too much at that moment. I hate his Adam's apple, his nose, his eyes, his shameless sneer. It's a direct, spontaneous loathing. That's what I'm afraid of. I feel I won't be able to resist the temptation. I'll go now, Mitya. I trust that God will take good care of everything and see to it that nothing terrible happens. And I'll sit here and wait for that miracle. But if it doesn't happen, then... Alyosha went his way to his father's house, deep in thought. That's the end of chapter 5. Please subscribe. Thank you for watching. Please like. And I'll see you in the next video where I read chapter 6, Smerdyakov. See you in that video.